Hello, everybody. Please welcome writer, director Tom McCarthy and Matt Damon.
Thank you very much.
We're smiling under these masks.
We got big smiles.
Yes, behind all those masks, people are smiling.
I guess we should take
I think, is it okay if we take them off?
Far enough away from everyone.
Yes.
I've been tested, I think, 7 times just this week, so.
Yeah, and everybody's vaccinated in here. We're vaxxed and waxed, so. Tom,
right.
when I introduced the film, I mentioned that your films, the history of your films, and that the realistic aspect of your films. But I pointed out that they needed to keep an eye out with the visual journey, which is one of the things I greatly admire about you. The fact that the profound journey that Bill goes through visually, at the first half of the film, when they're in Oklahoma, you use anamorphic lenses and it's static. And by the time that it arrives in Marseille, it's all handheld. And by the time we get back to Oklahoma, you use spherical lenses as if Bill brought something back. You know, can you tell us about that plotting visually the journey of Bill?
Thank you for all that. And yeah, you're very astute. All true. You know, I feel like as a filmmaker, I try to disappear behind the camera in a way. So I'm probably more Lumet than Scorsese, you know, or that's more where I'm reaching, more Ozu than Kurosawa kind of thing. I like the frame. I like to trust my actors, and I like to kind of bring the audience into the reality, which is why we shoot 185 a lot. I like the feel of that. I like the sort of journalistic feel of that frame. And what we can do with it. And I thought specifically with this character of Bill Baker and the journey we wanted to take our audience on, I kind of had I think Masanobu Takinagi, my wonderful cinematographer, and I had a very clear idea of what we wanted to do. And you sort of just laid it out pretty concretely that, you know, when we did start with the spherical, and so we want a little bit more space around the frame, around Bill, specifically in Oklahoma, and we were quite static. We were mostly on steady.
Sorry to interrupt, but it gives you a sense of the isolation of the character in Oklahoma.
Exactly, and just feeling that sky and that flatness too. You really kind of feel that around the edges, and it's a tough thing to capture. We also didn't want to romanticize it. You know, we didn't want to make it too special in a way. We just wanted to feel like you were there and you felt this man alone in his space, even when he was sitting at a table with his mother-in-law. So there was that. And yeah, as soon as we land on the ground in Marseille, we kind of go...
That's where we live.
It's been a long week, ladies and gentlemen, but I am here with you all in this room. He's very good with lines on set. Never needed a cue, ever. He would do this to me. He often say, "You're supposed to say action." I would say, "Action, action." You know, we would go handheld. We wanted to feel that energy, as you guys could see, that Marseille is an incredible city. The layers, the textures, the depth, just what it provided as a canvas. Everyone that arrived, I started bringing my creative team, first Massa, then Phil Messina, my production designer, and other creative teams started arriving early on. And like, it was so fun bringing people in that city and just seeing them sort of be like, oh man, this is gonna be really fun to capture and to recreate and to dig into. And, you know, I've said it before, but we never shot on a soundstage, right? We never felt the need to. Just the light was too incredible, and what the patina of the city is sort of undeniable, and we felt specifically juxtaposed with Oklahoma, crucial to Bill's journey.
And then when you get back to Oklahoma, there is a dress. I mean,
the handheld came back to Oklahoma.
Yeah. And we brought, I said the lens is reverse shutter, and we brought the spherical back with us there because we did. We wanted to have the audience feel that sense of there's something Bill brought with him, that little extra something, and it's so subtle. And the only scene we shoot in Oklahoma, the entire movie handheld, is the last scene on the porch. We wanted that to breathe. We wanted you to be really with these two people trying to reconcile not just everything that's happened, in terms of story, but just thematically where we were landing and maybe the biggest questions we were asking of our audience there. We just really wanted to be as intimate as possible, specifically for the last shot on Matt.
Matt, the character of Bill, it subverts our expectations of the American hero. Him going to Marseille, he's going to save the day. Can you tell us about navigating this character that is subverting our expectations of what we think of as the American hero?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, as a writer, I would say that exact thing that you're saying. But when you're playing it, it's all about playing all of these scenes real, and so the setup does feel more like a kind of classic Hollywood thriller setup. But we wanted all those scenes. It's about a guy who's the opposite of, say, Jason Bourne, who would go into that situation and know everything that he's supposed to do to accomplish what he wants to accomplish. This guy's got none of the requisite skills or tools to. He doesn't speak the language. He doesn't understand the culture. Like, Bill doesn't know what's going on around him for most of the movie. He doesn't understand what people are saying or what they're thinking or why they're doing what they're doing. He's pretty lost. And so it's about that guy, but who's just got this overwhelming impulse as a parent to repair, the damage that he's done. He's really failed his daughter in so many ways, and he carries all this guilt and shame and pain and grief. And the weight we talked about a lot, you just want to feel it from the moment you see him. He's a man who's carrying something, and so he's got so that feeds this desire for him to kind of make it right and redeem himself, but he doesn't really have any of the tools to do that.
Tom, you started working on this script about 10 years ago, and is gone through many changes. What I was struck is the changes politically that have undertaken our country, where we've moved to a more populist, and all those things are in the script. And can you tell us about that?
Yeah, my first blush at shot at the script about 10 years ago, it was more of a thriller. It was my first shot at a thriller, and it didn't work. It lacked dimension for me. It lacked humanity, sort of emotional dimension, and I just didn't have a point of view on it, which ultimately I need as a director when I sort of take off my writer cap and put on the director cap. And I put it down for 6 years. It's the first time I've ever done that. I picked it up, and I thought, wow, I still like the conceit, the setup of the movie, but I couldn't put my hand on what was not working. And I reached out to two writers, Thomas Bidigan and Noé Debré, who work a lot with Jacques Audiard, who's a director I greatly admire. And his
Prophet.
films, what's that?
A Prophet.
Yeah, and Rust and Bone and a bunch of others. And we started collaborating. We kind of started from scratch. And as you point out, that was now 2016. So the world was changing. And suddenly I felt like I had something to say and a point of view on this guy. And if not a point of view, and maybe I did, maybe that's the right turn of phrase, I had a point of view on Bill Baker, but I had a lot more questions about who Bill Baker was. And interestingly enough, that was the first time I started traveling to Oklahoma. I had somehow been to Marseille 5 or 6 times at this point in deep research, and I hadn't gone to Oklahoma. And I was like, shame on me, shame on me. I feel like I know these people and this culture, and I don't. And I got on a plane. I remember I said to my wonderful wife, Wendy, who I work with a lot, I got to go. And she's like, yeah, you should go tomorrow. And I did. I went like the next day. I got off the plane in Oklahoma, and I was like, shit. I don't know this place at all. And I started digging in, and it was incredibly enlightening and insightful, and I realized the work I had to do on this. And I think it spoke to thematically where we were going with the movie and what ultimately became a point of view on what I was trying to say at that time, or maybe better yet, understand, because I think that's what we're doing with movies, right? We're trying to understand the human condition a bit more. So that was an incredibly pivotal moment. I remember calling back to the French writers who were just soaking this up, because as much as we were all in a sort of tailspin in 2016, the rest of the world were like on their couches eating popcorn, watching us with like incredible fascination and glee, like, what the hell? Every conversation would be like, how are you? What's going on there? Tell me exactly what you're feeling, but in like cool French accents. And I think it really, all this fed into what became a very, very different story. And I'll add one other thing, which I think was critical to the development of the movie and really ties back into Matt in the central performance, is we were all, like, we started working together around that time, first year, like relaying out the story and kind of reinventing it. And we were all listening to long form podcasts, S-Town, Serial, a number of others. And we started talking about that format and questioning why cinema doesn't go there more often. Why does it have to stay in a lane? Why does it have to be a thriller or a suspense movie or a love story or a drama? Why can't it move? I was so captivated by where these long form podcasts were taking me. And we thought, if we had a central character that was multidimensional enough and compelling enough, our audience would follow us into these different places. And so that was a big kind of template breakthrough for the movie for us. But it only worked if Bill Baker works, right? So that was like a big thing for us. Like, can we build this character in such a way, and then can the actor execute in such a way that the audience will go on that journey?
Matt, 80% of the film, it's in French, and how did that help you get into, you know, the shoes of Bill? The fact, the authenticity of the fact that everything. I mean, from a spectator point of view, I love that it added suspense, it added mystery, and it made me feel the way the character was feeling. A foreigner in a foreign country. The fact that 80% of the language spoken was in French, how
It was entirely helpful because I don't speak French. So I was completely lost, very much like Bill, most of the time. I mean, obviously it's different for, you know, I parachute into these other countries all the time to make movies, and I don't actually parachute. That's a turn of phrase. Sorry.
It's a pretty good image,
It's a pretty
though,
good
right?
image. I'm going into Hungary, guys. I got a movie to make.
Here he comes, right on time.
Open the door.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm glad you bring up those films. In those films, they would have French people with subtitles speaking. Instead, we're totally immersed in this authentic world.
Yeah, I think that's just speaks to what Tom was trying to do, and trying to put this guy who would never really be in a world like that. I mean, it's you know, going back to what Tom was saying about Oklahoma and the specificity of that place. Like, he kept saying to me, we were months out from shooting, and he's like, buddy, you got to get down here. You got to get down here. And he was sending me all these interviews he was doing with these roughnecks. So I was listening to them on tape over and over and over again, and to hear the language and how they talked about it, they describing their jobs. And he's like, you have to come down here. And I had read and fell in love with this script just based on the dynamics of the. I go, no, it's a guy. It doesn't matter. He can be Oklahoma. It could be Boston. It could be anywhere. It's a guy who's trying to repair his relationship with his daughter. This really works. As you know, I already have my way into this thing. I get it. And it wasn't, you know, it was very much like what happened to Tom. I got down there and I went, oh, wow. Like the specificity of this roughneck culture, this subculture, I should say, is incredible. And it's not just a guy from a kind of a poor rural area. No. A roughneck is a very specific thing, and I didn't know anything about it. And when I started, and these roughnecks were incredible with us. Once they realized that we were trying to get it right, and you know, because obviously there was a little, I wouldn't say tension, but wariness at the outset, because they were going like, what are you Hollywood liberals doing here? Like, what are you? And Tom's like, I'm a New York liberal. I'm not a Hollywood liberal.
I thought that was important at the time.
Yeah, it didn't matter so much to them, but they were understandably, I think, wary of kind of what our intentions were, and once they realized, no, these guys just really want to depict us accurately, and the movie has empathy for Bill and compassion for Bill, and when they kind of realized that, they gave us amazing access and took us to these drilling rigs, took us to their homes, and you know, to meet their family. I mean, it was just, I really walked away understanding this guy in a very specific, and all of the physicality of the performance came from them. It's like that whole thing, the Red Wing boots. It's not just boots, it's Red Wing boots. That's what, you know, it's like the fire retardant on the jeans that make them feel like cardboard. And the whole look and all of that stuff, it's like a uniform. And I could show you 15 pictures on my phone of these guys on drilling rigs. And so it's the specificity of that transplanted to Marseille and juxtaposed to that. And it's not, but not in a cutesy fish out of water, like, oh, he zoinks, he doesn't know how to find the restaurant. You know, it's like, it's not that at all. It's like this guy who's compelled to do this thing that's incredibly important to him, and he's there, and he's that.
You brought up the fire retardant jeans and the metal-toed boots, the Red Wings, and the fact that you never take them off. But then there's a subtlety to the costume design that, like, he starts adding pieces throughout, you know, the film. You know, you at first, I mean, pardon me, I'm very compulsive. I watch every detail. You know, I noticed that you had like about 6 days worth of clothing, and then throughout the film, you start adding pieces and stuff.
That's very astute, actually. Thank you for noticing. That's the stuff we spent hours talking about, and nobody ever noticed.
You're the one who noticed.
But how does that, like, help you navigate the arc of the story of Bill?
Well, we have long conversations. Corinne, our costume designer, actually was in direct contact with the Roughnecks. Once we went down there, we said, do you mind talking to the wardrobe supervisor? And everything that she built this, I mean, all of those 6 days of clothes, and I think it was 6 days or a week of clothes that I had, you know, these flannel shirts and these, you know, that all came from those guys. And then when we were in Marseille, she would come and she would introduce a new piece and say, I showed this to Tom, he likes it. What do you think is a t-shirt you would have bought? Because he ends up staying for obviously 3-4 more months, and you know, and as time went on and he's working construction, he would of course have to go get a new t-shirt, get a new thing. And so she started to augment the wardrobe with things that she could find in markets in Marseille that would be cheap. It would be a French open air market equivalent of a Target. Right? Because
it's the one where Lilu and him, where they're buying, and she pulls out the OM shirt. We would start going there and being like, what would Bill hold up? And be like, okay, I can wear that.
Yeah, that's going to work.
You know, I don't like the zipper here that much, but I can wear it. It's close, you know.
And Tom, you know, tell us about shooting in Marseille. You could have done a postcard, you know, Born Identity look at Marseille. Instead, it gets nitty gritty about, you know, Marseille. Can you tell us about exploring Marseille as?
Yeah, I mean, you know, like I said, early on, I just fell in love with the city, and I kept bringing my creative team. And I watched this, Phil Messina, my wonderful production designer, came to the film, and like we were talking about it afterwards, and like, you know, we're still American filmmakers, more or less, going there. But we were incredibly inclusive and collaborative with our French team because we knew it had to play authentic. We knew that, you know, now I'm thinking about we were premiering at Cannes, still gives me hives because I'm like, oh my God, the French are going to call, you know, bullshit on this if it's not working, right? Like they're going to know, we're going to feel it. It has to be authentic. And so I think we all felt the high bar of that, right? Like every little detail, like the apartment, the specificity of that little of Virginie's apartment, every detail from when she's moving in to 3 months later to 6 months later, you know, feeling the passage of time as they settle in and feeling every little detail. That was all just so much, it was so much wonderful stuff to kind of just geek out on and dig in on, you know. Like, of course, you have the big set pieces at like Calanque or the Stade Olympique and those kind of things, which are incredible and wonderful moments to film. But for me, it's in the detail of it and getting that right, you know, and then plugging Matt into that, right? And I kind of want to go back to what you were saying about him and the specificity. All that work we did only works if he puts it all together and elevates it. And as a director, look, I know he's a great actor. I've wanted to work with him for a long time. You know, he's Matt Damon. He's going to come in and do good work. I didn't know. I'm totally serious. I'm like, oh, he's Matt Damon, but can he do this? Because he's got to get lost to the point where people are like, I will follow this guy wherever he goes. And I haven't seen him quite do this type of role before. I don't think you've played this type of role. I've seen him do a lot of great work. So it was so exciting day one. By the time he showed up, all that prep to be like, oh, he's gone. Something about this character and the time in his life and who he was, like he just sort of disappeared. And so suddenly all the specificity we had done in Marseille, all that work on building it, anywhere we plugged Bill into, his character felt so multidimensional. It was fun for us to watch on set. Like literally it was like a video game of like, oh, here comes Bill Baker, you know, and that walk. And it just became easy to watch. And I'm like, okay, this is a good sign. Like a podcast where you just want to go where the podcast is going, we're going to go where Bill Baker goes. And that's a true credit. All that is a credit. It only works if that works, if Matt's performance works, which I think it did. So I think that, I just got to underline that once. And then I will talk trash about him. But I think all that specificity, you know, that's, as Matt pointed out, that's what we love doing.
You know, tell us about the set piece, the velodrome piece. I was blown away. I mean, you have 50,000 people in a stadium. 80,000? Yeah. And Matt Damon is live there in the middle of it. How?
No, it was Bill Baker.
Well, it was Bill Baker, but tell us about shooting that set piece.
By the way, you could put Barack Obama in the middle of that place, and nobody's going to pay attention to anything but what's happening on the soccer field. They're the most rabid, wonderful fans. It's one of the great things to do is to go to a football game in Europe, you know. But specifically, the Velodrome is kind of famous for, those fans are famous for being particularly nuts.
Yeah, so. I mean, those fans, I'm not going to lie, at times, it's not just me, it feels like an unsafe place to be. You know, like there's an energy when those flare, it feels like a mini revolution every game they have. And it is the whole city shows up, and the passion and the conviction in those stadiums is undeniable. And like the way we shot that is we shot a live match on one night, which was, we had 5 cameras and you know, covering both the game and Matt and little Lilu, who we all adore. And we just got as much as we could. Then we went back 2 more nights with about 1,000 extras. So the immediate people around Matt are almost all extras. And what I love most about that story, and what's very telling, they're all from Marseille. They're all not actors. None of these aren't professional extras. There's no such thing as that in Marseille. But Matt's right. If you watch the extras around him, when you go see this movie again and again and again, in the next 2 weeks in theaters, you're gonna see this, see the people around him. They just forget they're next to Matt. There's one guy at first, he was just like, okay, I got to see. Midway through, he's just like, oh, you know, it's like, I kept telling my editor, freeze that frame. Look at that guy. Look how mad he is right now. They really forgot. Oh, the only funny thing that happened, it was because, you know, again, he was pretty unrecognizable with the beard and the glasses and the hat. But do you remember? I don't know if you remember this.
That must have been drawing attention, the fact that they...
For the most part, not until one of the photographers, you know how you always see like rows of like 8 or 10 or 12 sports with those huge lenses? Somebody picked him up. So as we're filming the game, suddenly they all turned and were pointing at him, and we're like, okay, this doesn't look good. We had to get down there and like pay the guys just to do their job and shoot the game, because they had picked Matt off, and then there was a couple of things in the paper the next day, like Matt Damon, OM supporter. You know, it was, that got around a little bit, I think.
Matt, there is so many cultural and political differences between Virginie and Maya and you. You know, can you tell us about navigating those differences and working with the 2 actresses in that relationship?
I could talk about the 2 actresses forever. I mean, and they're very different people to talk about, obviously, because Camille is a formidable professional actress. I mean, she's just incredible. And Lilu is, you know, we jokingly call her the Meryl Streep of 9-year-olds, because she's just phenomenal, and but it's all intuitive. She's a natural, you know, and after the first day of working with her, we stopped and said, we literally like sat down and went, okay, we have lightning in a bottle. Like, how do we not, like, what do we do? Like, you know, in baseball, it's the equivalent of pitching a no-hitter, and everybody stops talking to the pitcher because they don't want to mess them up. And it's like, you know, how do we keep family members away who, well-intentioned as they may be, say like, you should be angry in this scene, you know what I mean, and start noting these little kids to death. And we've seen all these kinds of things happening. He's worked with kids a bunch. I've worked with them too, and it's like, how do we preserve this beautiful? I mean, she wouldn't do the same scene twice the same way. She was just so natural, and I mean, that first scene we shot sitting in the hallway, and she's got her arm up, and she's just sitting there, and she just looks bored, like, and it's like, who are you? Like, what are you? Because that's all she just relaxed and just went right into it, and so that was, we just had these conversations about, right, how do we keep this really joyful? Right? Mm-hmm. How do we keep it playful and fun? Like, the second it becomes a job, it's going to be a drag. And if we exhaust her, it's going to be a drag. And I have to say, the really draconian French laws about kids working, which are wonderful, but I think we had Lilu for like 2 hours a day or something incredible. It was like, not like here in America where we can work them like 18 hours,
Good old U.S. of A.
Yeah. But so like the entire crew, we'd build our whole day around, all right, Lilu's coming. These are the shots we need to get. We'd shoot everything around her, and then we'd go back and shoot our stuff. If we were doing over the shoulders, it would be with a double who also could only work 2 hours a day. So she'd work the reverse shots, right? Mm-hmm. And they boarded it out. Walt, our first AD, is amazing, and he and Tom figured out how to do it. And that I'm really proud that we kept it fun. I mean, we saw Lilu in Cannes with her whole family, and she reported that she had a great time on the movie, which is exactly what we wanted to hear, but that's why that performance is what it is.
And I don't want to pry too much on your acting technique and your process, but the beauty of the narrative is that through Lilu, you learn to be a better dad in your relationship with Abigail. No, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's very much this. When I read the script, it was so heartbreaking about it, is the guy finally becomes the father to this little kid that he couldn't be to his own daughter, and that's what's so tragic about what he gives up. And the movie, it's about a guy who gets exactly what he wants at the beginning of the movie. He goes off with this intention, I'm going to get my daughter out of jail, and he gets that. And at the end, he gets what he wants, but he's a very different person at the end. And so his horizons have been vastly expanded, and the world looks entirely different to him.
Tom, and this is a positive thing about the film that I greatly admire, is that it defies genres. I love the fact that you start as a character saving his daughter, and then it becomes this personal growth drama, and then it becomes a thriller, and then it pivots and becomes something else. Is that something that came natural to the story for you, that it defined the genres and pivoting?
I think it came out of the process. I mentioned a little bit about the template on the podcast earlier, but also working with French writers. You could see it in my filmmaking. I'm deeply influenced by European filmmakers, by French filmmakers, and you can see it in my style a little bit. And so I was really excited to collaborate with Thomas and Noé and to push each other. And I think this movie represents a kind of somewhere in between on American and French filmmaking, and allowing it to go there and not being afraid of that, like not worrying about if we did it in such a way that it was both compelling and engaging, organic, that it would somehow make sense for an audience and they would keep, I know you guys were the judge, you went on the journey, but can we go on that journey? And also I just feel like, if I made this movie a long time ago, we talked about the thriller aspect, the American abroad getting his, saving his daughter, or the fish out of water. We've seen a lot of this, right? So cinematically, where do we start to go? And I think this movie is pressing on that, trying to challenge an audience, not just in terms of the plot, but also just the form and where it goes. And I feel like it was an exciting process for me to kind of keep toying with that, and then in the edit room with my longtime editor, Tom McCarthy, trying to find the balance of that, right? Where is the balance of letting the story go? How far can we drift till we bring it back? And that was just, the movie has a lot of scope and emotional scope, keeping those threads alive. I think I couldn't have made this movie 10 years ago. I know I couldn't have. Like, you know, your movies, your work is sort of cumulative, right? And this has elements of The Visitor. It has bits of Win-Win. It has moments of Spotlight. It has moments of even things that I've done that haven't worked. It like has it all. Like we are the body of our work at some point. And I think, you know, creatively, even intuitively, you're drawing on all those bits and pieces, right? And then hopefully, and in this case, look, I feel like I've got a little bit of a leash to go make movies right now, right? And so I'm going to try to push that. I'm going to try to challenge that and push me. And it might not be for everyone. Ultimately, I'm making it for an audience. I really hope you go on the ride, but I think it's my job to keep kind of not only challenging the sort of form, but challenging myself.
Following on what you just said, I mean, the film, on the surface, you could just enjoy it for the ride, and by the fact that we have Matt Damon in his best performance to date, and it's highly enjoyable, but the film explores the notion of American moral authority in the current state that we're in. Is that something that as a director and writer you had a hard time balancing the entertainment aspect and at the same time, you know, the politics that the film dives into?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of this as an overtly political movie, right? I don't. But it was, again, I started this script, picked it up again in 2016, so do the math, right? And I feel like one thing beyond the red and blue of it all, which I think we're all tired of a little bit, I was interested in this idea, really, you said the right word, moral authority, and also moral imperative, right? So moral authority, at that point, I felt like the country was asking itself, are we still a beacon of justice and equality around the world? Do we even want that? What is American exceptionalism? Does it really exist? And then specifically, as Matt was alluding to earlier, like in the thriller, the hero, the protagonist, has this moral imperative. I know being a movie, what I'm going to do. I'm going to get my little girl out of jail. That's all I give a damn about. I'm going to go get that done. This movie wanted to sort of, you know, I think, start to consider the consequences of that moral, of what we perceive nationally to be a moral imperative. It's not an indictment on the country, but it is a question about how we're proceeding in the world. So this is something the writers and I would be reading about, talking about, thinking about, and then we would just go back to story and see how it filters down, because I think if you try to capture that, but yes, Bill Baker and Matt's character is carrying a lot of that into the movie. You mentioned populism, nationalism, right? There is a sort of me-first mentality to that. What are the human emotional consequences of that with the people around your lives? And as Matt said, his character gets exactly what he thinks he wants at the beginning of the movie, but boy, is he left in a very different place at the end, and there are real tragic, emotional consequences to that. And I feel like that, for me, was a really exciting thing to analyze. And it's interesting, right? Because then we got the pandemic, right? So suddenly that last scene with him and his daughter on the porch has a whole new relevance that I couldn't have predicted as a filmmaker 4 or 5 years ago. But suddenly this idea of like the world has shifted. Our view of the world has shifted. I don't know about you guys, but I feel like I know less today than I did 30 years ago. And like, it's confusing, you know? It's really confusing. And I think that all sort of plays into it. And that's just timing sometimes with movies.
Matt, we have seen Abigail Breslin grow in front of our eyes, and she's phenomenal in this. You know, tell us about your scenes with Abigail.
Well, like everybody else here, I think we all saw her at the first, you know, at the same time.
Yeah, Little Miss Sunshine.
Little Miss Sunshine. And she's just a very diligent, she's a young professional actor, just like I was. I mean, she's in her mid-20s. I remember kind of coming onto the scene around that time, and she had a really difficult job, because I think we shot at Beaumet, 10 days or something? Yeah. So like two or maybe 8 days, I think. Maybe it was a week and a half or something we were there. So we shot in the actual prison. So she had to run that journey of the character, like all of those prison scenes, obviously, because we had to shoot them in a block. You know, it's, you know, 3 or 4 or 5 page scene, one after the other, and then they're very difficult scenes for her. Because she's, you know, the information's getting doled out from one scene to the, so she comes in and she realizes something, and it's just, they were very, very difficult, challenging scenes, and the entire movie doesn't work if she doesn't get them right. And so it's that thing where we knew it was all kind of hanging on her, and she came in and just absolutely crushed it. She went from being a brilliant little natural, the way Lilu is, to a legitimate, formidable pro. Yeah.
And and tell us about the both of you. One of the iconic scenes in this movie is the Kalanka, the sequence where you guys go to that cliff and she jumps in the water, part of Marseille. Tell us about working with her in that scene and being there. And Tom, the importance to you as a director to have shot at Kalanka in Marseille.
Yeah, I mean that's just. I mean it's one. I didn't know those existed, but it's a very famous part of that city. Going back, I mean I had never spent any time in Marseille, and I just couldn't believe how spectacular the entire city was. But then this place that she brings her father to, and again that's another very difficult scene for Abby when we finally get out of the prison. It's like we go to into the scene where she has to mourn the loss of this person that she loved, and it just felt like those scenes just stacked up on Abby, and it was just a lot of work for her.
Yeah, she does a lot of the heavy lifting, right? Because I think also what she's bringing to the movie is this sort of idea of generational trauma that has been visited upon her, and now she's in prison. Like the stakes couldn't in some way be higher, but she's still driving, she's still pushing, and she's obviously a very conflicted character in many ways. And her one lifeline is this guy who she has an incredibly dysfunctional relationship with, and possibly broken beyond repair, but maybe the end suggests otherwise, but a very difficult sort of slog. And in terms of like Galank, it just sort of felt like where we would go to film that, right? Like that's maybe her most special place in Marseille. And if I was getting out of prison for a day, I would probably go swim in that water too, right? And just get lost in it. So it also felt like that was a place, she has this sort of moment of opening up to her father in that scene about her ex-girlfriend, dead girlfriend. And we thought, initially we had set that at the cemetery, and it never felt right. It just felt overwrought, considering how intense. And then as we started stacking the script and playing locations, I'm like, oh, this is where she would open up. As we all know, you people probably in this community better than others, looking out at that ocean is holy, right? It is a different experience. And like it profoundly opens people up in a way. And I think we felt like that experience of that day, that swim, she's had time with her dad now 4 or 5 hours, and then she's looking out and she has a moment to kind of go there in her brain and just kind of monologue literally as a person, forget about as a character. That felt really elemental to that scene.
I could go on talking to you guys, but we have to wrap it up. One last question. I'm obsessed with Michael Dana's score in the film. It's so subtle, and it plots the emotional journey of Bill with the piano. And can you tell us about your work, Tom, with Michael?
Yeah, but before I do, we went on so much about Lilu and even Abby. I think I just want to give a shout out to Kemi Cotton, the incredible French actress.
Yes. I'm sorry.
That's all right. That's all right. Everyone gets fixated on Lilu because how can you not? And but I can't say enough about Camille either.
She's terrific.
I couldn't be happier with this ensemble, with these four, and then the supporting French actors around them, and then Deanna Dunnigan, who plays the mother-in-law, is an incredible Steppenwolf actress and theater actress.
Oh, Deanna, she won the Tony for Best Actress in August Osage County.
Yeah. Amazing actress. And I felt very fortunate with this ensemble. But Camille, I really found in Paris, I had all these other French actors I had in mind. I hadn't actually heard of her. She was introduced to me by a friend. She came in to read and just really helped us really nail the character, both as writers and filmmakers, with her energy and performance. And she sort of hosts the movie in a way. She brings everyone to the table, sort of, in a way that she's got such charm and uniqueness that you would believe she's could connect with Abby on an intellectual level and an emotional one, and somehow have room and an open heart for Bill in a way that she takes people in. So I have to shout her out.
Of course.
I've done that. Now Michael Dana. I will say, Michael Dana, every score I ever do, you start with a temp track. And almost every time I come in to watch my editor, Tom McCardle's first temp track, he uses Michael Dana. And I can almost call it out now. I'm like, Michael Danny's like, I couldn't help it. I love the guy. And so when I hired Michael for this job, he was so excited. He was like starstruck for Michael Dana. And it turns out Dana's just the coolest, gentlest, most collaborative artist. And I needed someone with Dana's range because of what we were talking about in terms of story. I needed someone who could go from Bill driving through the projects, sort of desperately searching for someone, to a scene with Bill and Maya in a market looking at nail polish together. I remember calling Dan and like, I need a hairpin turn here. I need you to kind of like shift this. And like, he just could bring all those elements. And, you know, he composes with a guitar, which I thought was really important for this, and the opening Oklahoma of it all. And you know, the guy just is the full package, and I think he just has a tremendous amount of empathy as an artist and as a musician, and I think he connected with that.
Well, Tom, you just keep getting better and better. I've loved you since 2004, and just my love for you.
I have loved you since then, too, my first time here.
Yeah, and Matt, best performance ever.
Thanks.
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you all for coming.
Appreciate it.